I work with founders who have launched their company, have done a proof of concept. So this is a good idea. It's getting traction in the market. And then they're trying to scale and they hit a plateau. They're trying to scale and ramp this thing up and they hit their head on a ceiling or a wall. And then they come and say, what's wrong? The honest truth is it's usually them. So it's usually them getting in their own way. And they are the bottleneck for their team.
Today, I'm very excited to have Emily Sander on our show. Thank you for being here, Emily. Emily has a very fascinating journey, which we're going to get into, from a C-suite executive herself to becoming an ICF certified leadership coach. This is someone that's going to, if you're stuck, she's going to unstick you both in your life and your career. Emily, thank you so much for being here. Let's start with your journey.
Yes, well, it's a pleasure being here. I've been looking forward to this one. So thank you so much for having me. But
Absolutely.
My origin story. So I was born in Seoul, South Korea. I was adopted as a baby, brought over to the States, raised in Seattle. And, my dad used to read me bedtime stories. And when it was his turn, he'd read me comic books. And so my favorite was Superman. And I liked that he used his powers for good and he never gave up. And he went back home to get advice from his parents on kind of his moral compass. And when I was growing up, I was adopted. I looked different than my parents, and kids had questions and kids were mean sometimes. And my dad saw that I had a little trouble dealing with this as a young kid. And he said, Superman was adopted too. And all of a sudden that made adoption cool. So, that's my origin story. And then from there, one of my first jobs after school was for this tech company, and it was confidential and they were launching a new product, but it was under wraps, whole bunch of NDAs. And that turned out to be a tester for the original Kindle device for Amazon. And so I was on that testing team. We launched that right before Christmas in 2007. And then that led to a series of small to medium technology-based businesses where I got to move into leadership roles. I got to build a international client management team from scratch. So hiring people for EMEA region, APAC, Americas, all of that good stuff. We were in private equity-backed rapid growth environments. So I got exposure, and I definitely got experience in things that I probably wouldn't have at a larger company that wasn't PE backed, but I learned a lot. I drank from the fire hose. I worked my way up, and my corporate career culminated in the role of chief of staff, which is the strategic advisor to the CEO and executive team. And I wrote a book on that topic, and I have a podcast on that topic. And so I'm doing that now. But about 5 to 7 years ago, I was saying, all right, what is your favorite part of what you do? And I was reflecting back on the different roles, and it was the one-on-one interactions where I got to help Jennifer speak up at team meetings. Christian didn't think he could present, but yet he presented at our annual Risk Summit in London in front of 250 people. Like, those kinds of things stuck with me. And so once I figured that out and figured that married with coaching was a good combination, I started my business, did the coaching in parallel, so evenings and weekends. And about 18 months ago, I came to this inflection point and I said, Emily, you can either put all the chips on the table and go into this and do it right and see if you can do it, or you can live the rest of your life asking what if. And so through a series of circumstances, I was like, all right, push all my chips on the table. Let's do this thing for a year. And it's taking traction and it's working and I'm loving it. And I get to wake up and be excited for what I do every day. But that's kind of my highlight reel.
But fun fact, I went to an all-Korean school when I was in second grade. How interesting was that? I mean, it was not actually a Korean school. It just happened to be in Koreatown in LA. I don't know if you know LA very well. And it was about 99% Korean. And the three minorities was a Vietnamese kid, right? A Filipino kid, and me. So
wow. That's very, like the opposite of my school. There are like 2 Asian kids. Yeah.
Isn't that funny? A complete reverse. But it sounds like, okay, so when you went all in on this leadership coaching adventure, did you have a backup plan by chance, Emily?
I mean, my backup plan was to go and get another quote unquote real job, right? So I knew I was hireable. I knew I had good experience and a good resume. So that was my backup. But I basically set myself up financially and otherwise to give this thing a run for a year. And I was like, okay, I can do it for a year and I have to make that year count. And towards the end of that, I would decide if this was going to work or if I needed to go back to, kind of corporate role.
Emily, what was so compelling about what you just described, the two people? Like, tell us, like, how did their careers or their lives change where it inspired you to do this as your career?
Yeah, I mean, I think again, it was looking back and saying what was actually rewarding and fulfilling. And look, I did quite well in my career. I climbed the ladder very fast and I had high accomplishments and did all those things. And those were great. I loved helping companies and helping the teams, but I could have easily played that game for another few decades and then looked back and said, "Oh my gosh, what did I do?" And I don't have time to do anything else in the same way that I can now. And so it was a series of circumstances, but there was that moment where I sat down and I said, if I'm, 60, 70, 80 years old and I'm sitting on the porch in a rocking chair and I'm looking back and saying, what do you regret? I would have regretted not trying. So even if I went to coaching and it quote unquote failed,
Yep.
like that's scary to me. But sitting in that rocking chair and not knowing and not having time to do anything scared me more. And so I wanted to help people. I wanted to make a difference. And I love coaching and I know that my clients get value from it and I get to do that all day long.
Nice. What is the actual role of a chief of staff? Because not every company has one. So tell us a little bit about their mission and why companies employ these wonderful folks.
Yeah. So chief of staff, there's no one type of chief of staff, but an analogy I like to use, there's a couple. So, the plastic thing on top of a 6-pack can of soda?
Yes.
That plastic thing that holds all the cans together is like a chief of staff. So the chief of staff holds the executive team together. So they report to their principal, which is typically the CEO, and they also work very closely with the executive team. So they're keeping everyone focused, on point, resourced correctly, and then they're part of that strategic discussion, but they're also operationalizing strategy. So they're tactically executing strategy across the organization. So you have like a COO who is in charge of all things operations. You have the CTO, technology, CFO, finance, etc. Chief of staff sees across all of those departments. So they're writing above department lines and they're basically, I would smoke jump into different departments and coordinate a whole bunch of company-wide initiatives. So there's the plastic thing on the 6-pack can of soda. There's a Swiss Army knife of the executive team. Someone used that analogy. I thought that was great. And then the third one I'll give you is that of an air traffic controller. So if you think about an airport and one of those big tall towers where the guy with the binoculars and headsets is coordinating with the planes, you come in here, this runway is full, divert over here. They're coordinating with the airlines and ground crew. That's what a chief of staff does for business. They don't own the airport per se. They don't own the airlines, but they are coordinating everything about it to make sure people are running safely and running on time.
And Emily, what would you say the key difference is between a chief of staff and a very high level executive assistant, for example?
Very high level. Yeah. So chief of staff and EA get a little bit confused. So EA, which are critically important to businesses and organizations, they're more, I want to say, administratively tactical, like clerical work, such as going through emails, files, taking minutes, sorting notes, doing PowerPoints, coordinating calendars, all of those types of things. Critically important. The chief of staff role is much broader and it's also much more strategic. So an EA wouldn't be helping decide if we're going to do this merger or acquisition. They wouldn't be helping to roll out the benefit plan and wouldn't be working on the product rollouts and how do we market our new service. So those are the types of things that a chief of staff would be working on. Chiefs of staff work very closely with EAs or executive assistants. And sometimes I've seen a chief of staff have EAs reporting to them, but they're very, very separate roles.
I bet. You being a high level leader yourself, and probably by now having dealt with hundreds of leaders across different organizations, whether you're coaching them or you were in those roles, how do you define effective leadership? And what are like some core principles that you believe every leader should embody?
That's a big question. So the first thing I'd say is leaders today have to be adaptable. So the only constant is change, and you have to be adapting at macro levels and middle levels and direct levels. Let me explain that. So macro, if you're a CEO of a company or a founder, you have to know what's going on in the world. We're so interconnected today. You have to know what's going on in the economy. You have to know what's going on in your industry. Is there technology that is game changing your industry? Is there a competitor coming up that's offering something you don't? So there's those larger perspectives. And then there's also, all right, like how do I adapt to this team meeting and this audience versus the one I'm going to talk to next? So as CEO, you could be talking to investors, potential fundraising activities, and then you could be talking at an all staff meeting. So maybe some of those topics are the same, but a lot of times those messages are different and what it means to people is different. And so you have to be able to not only adapt and adjust the content of what you're saying, but also your delivery to make that effective and to make it land to your listener and audience the way you intend. So there's kind of those things. And then it's little interactions you have all throughout the day. So we're on calls, we're on Zoom, we're on Slack, we're on text. And are you adapting to the people and to the circumstances that you're in? A lot of leaders are like a bull in a china shop and they're like my way and my stuff and they have no awareness of what's going on around them. So I think that would be the first thing that I would say is you have to be adaptable as a leader in today's world.
Right. I think the old school bull in a china shop unfortunately doesn't work anymore.
No,
right?
Yeah.
I mean, you have to really influence and get folks to understand why. And why is it good for the organization? Why is it good for them and their careers to get them to do any deep work, I would think, right?
Well, just to tag on to that real quick, I think that's important because, back in the day when people were doing factory work on conveyor belts, you were paid to produce this many widgets in an hour or in a day. Today, we pay people to think and to have ideas and to provide solutions and to come up with something creative from their unique vantage point. Because CEOs, they play their role and that's all well and fine. But the customer service rep who's talking to customers every freaking day, if you don't think they have good information, if you don't think what they have to say is important, you're missing the mark there. So huge. I think having that understanding is important too.
I'm sure you've dealt with many failures in your career, as we all have. Can you discuss a pivotal failure and the lesson it taught you, and more importantly, how it influences your coaching today?
That's a good question. My failure. So this show is only 30 to 60 minutes long, so
that's all we got.
Pick just one. I would say that I would classify myself as a recovering perfectionist. And I liked things being high quality. I liked things that were excellent. I wanted everything to be impressive all the time. And I held myself and others around me to a very, very high standard. Sometimes this served me very well. Sometimes it did need to be pitch perfect. A lot of times it didn't. And I would force myself and force my teams to come up here. I want it 99.9, not 99.7. I want it perfect. I want it here. And with that, there comes a point of diminishing returns where, sure, we could work on that again. We could do another revision. We could do another dry run. We could do all the bells and whistles, but that doesn't get us any material advantage or impact. And I would drive myself and drive my team to do that. And now one of my mantras is messy action. So get it out there. Have a bias for progress, have a bias for done. And I definitely burned some cycles, burned some team members out with my drive for excellence, which again, not a bad thing in and of itself, but you have to know how to use it well, how to adapt and use it situationally. And I just didn't have a second option. It was always, all the time, 100%. And on some of the things, it was like, look, 80% is just fine. 80% is better than like most people's 40 or 50%. And like, just keep this thing moving. So I slowed things down. I burned people out. And that was, I'm not going to name names, but I remember someone specifically. And when I realized I had done that, I felt terrible. I was like, oh, expletive. Like, that is the last thing I was trying to do. I love this team member. They're so great. They contribute so much. They work so hard. And I just did that to them. And
one of my favorite sayings is, perfection is the enemy of done.
yeah.
Right? I don't know where I got it from, but it's just, you get nothing done. You spend, in an agile world, you can spend, 3 months on a project and then not check in often enough or try to perfect it. And now something's changed. Yeah. And it's going to emotionally destroy you as a professional who cares about your work, who's just put every inch of everything they had to make it perfect. But really, we didn't want perfection. We wanted 80%, like you said. We wanted it out to get feedback on this MVP or whatever it was, so we can make the corrections or the tweaks needed to get it to the next level. So that's huge.
And it's also like, what is perfect? My perfect is one thing, but like, what is perfect? That's a subjective term, and it's a moving target. So if you're trying to dance around and hit it, you're just setting yourself up for disaster. But
even emotionally, right? If I think I've created a masterpiece and I spent days and nights and weekends perfecting something, and you give me some critique, I'm going to explode, right? Because to me, is like, this is perfection. What do you mean? This is my child. It's perfect. Versus if it was 80%, now you're giving me feedback. It's natural for me to say, oh no, this is not the final version. I just wanted to get this out so I can get some feedback. Thank you for that. That's great. So there is some power in just knowing that it's not perfect. That you knew it wasn't perfect. You got it out fast enough to get the feedback. So I think that alone is huge. Emily, more importantly, how do you use that today for your executive coaching? How do you use that failure?
Well, I have a client right now who is he's a leader in the product department. And he was having this issue where he's like, when I bring something up to the group, I want it to be perfect. I want it to be thought through. I want it to be polished and everything. And we kind of talked about some of the feedback he was getting from his colleagues, and they actually wanted him to give them iterations sooner. So they, like you said, knew where we were with this. What's the status update? But also they could provide feedback. So don't go all the way to 100%. Give it to us. We know it's a rough draft. We know it's V1 or a beta round, but that allows us to have a discussion with you. And then you can go back, make the product better and more suited to the client's needs faster. So that was, when you mentioned that, I was like, oh, that reminds me of this one client I'm working on this with.
You focus significantly on early executives and founders. What are some common challenges you see in this group, and how do you guide them through these challenges?
Yes. So I work with founders who have launched their company, have done a proof of concept. So this is a good idea. It's getting traction in the market. And then they're trying to scale and they hit a plateau. They're trying to scale and ramp this thing up and they hit their head on a ceiling or a wall. And then they come and say, what's wrong? The honest truth is it's usually them. Wow. So it's usually them getting in their own way, and they are the bottleneck for their team. And a lot of them know it. A lot of them, even deep down inside, they know they're part of the problem. And I work with them to, one, shift their mindset to adding value in a new way. They added value by being involved in everything and being, the head of product, the head of sales, the head of janitorial services before. That's what made them successful. But it's not anymore. They have to do something different. And just getting that notion across to someone is hard. And especially because it's their blood, sweat, and tears, right? I mean, this is their baby. They've maybe put all of their chips on the table for this one. So for someone to say, I need you to back off, I need you to trust people and let them do their job, they're like, no, what are you talking about?
What do you mean? I need to be more involved.
Yeah, I need to see every little thing. So I had a client who was, I laugh, I shouldn't. He was still going through every single JIRA ticket. I'm like, no. You are fundraising. You are in conferences. You are making connections. You are making high-level decisions. You don't add value anymore going through every single JIRA ticket. That you should not be doing that.
Well, it's opportunity cost too, right? Even if they add value, even if they are the best person to go through those JIRA tickets, who's second in command that could take over those, or not second in command, but who can do it almost as good as you, even at 80%. So you can go work on things they couldn't do. Like, right? So that's a huge one. Emily, very early on in my career, I was a director of a large company called Kaplan, test prep and admissions organizations. And I was only 26 years old, but one of the best books I read was What Got You Here Won't Get You There. Wow. I mean, I haven't read that book in 16 years. I've never read it again, but I still remember just that concept, just that title of What Got You Here. Because someone could say, what are you talking about, Emily? Like, this is how I got to the success. Like, who are you to tell me that I need to get out of the way? Really simple phrase. You are successful. What got you here won't get you to the next level. If you're not interested in the next level, then that's okay. Keep doing what you're doing, but let me step out of the way, right? You don't need me. But if you truly are hit a plateau and you truly want to get to the next level, we got to do something different. I met with this individual that challenged me in something really powerful. He was asking me, like, how's the business? And I was saying all the great things. And I mentioned one small issue that I had, one individual who I really liked that just wasn't a good fit anymore. And he was trying to get to a point where he was just recommending that I move on from this individual. And I knew I needed to do that, but I wasn't sold. He goes, great thing. He goes, you know what? It's okay, man. Look, this person will only slow you down by 6 months or a year. Knowing your personality and the rest of your team is so strong, you're still going to get to your goal just a year later. And then he shut up. He knew what he was doing. He knew exactly what I was doing, because it bothered me on the way home. And I was like, 6 months to a year may not mean much, especially when you care about your team, but it means a ton when you're talking about timing. I mean, people miss their IPOs by 6 months to a year and their companies fall apart. I know several companies that were going to have $1 billion exit, IPO. They didn't do it because they missed the boat by 6 months to a year. Then they almost sold for 700 million. They decided not to. For some reason, some ego reason. Guess what? They ended up selling, this is a true story, I think 10 years later for $15 million. I mean, this is the impact that 1 year, 6 months could make. So for me, that was a very compelling statement saying, okay, it seems like you don't want to get rid of this group or this individual. No problem. You'll still get to your goal just a year later.
Oh my gosh.
That's not okay.
No,
that's not
forever.
okay. So it's huge. So anyway, what are your thoughts on that whole concept?
No, I think, timing is everything. And we talked about being adaptable, but also being agile. If you can move fast, you typically win. That's for companies, that's for product rollouts, that's for anything. Like I was listening to this podcast about armies and Napoleon, and he won because he could move his men faster than anyone else. He also was creative and moved them in different formations than anyone had done before. But people thought, it took X amount of days to move from this location to that location. And that was their assumption. And he was able to mobilize his forces and get there. And so he had all these advantages. Same for business. I take that for business. If you can make yourself agile and nimble and quick and adaptable, you're like a jet ski or a speedboat versus like this slow moving
cruise line
barge. Yeah. Container cargo barge.
Absolutely.
So I think not only putting yourself in position to do that, but also like lifting up your eyes. Like if you're doing Jira tickets, you're not like looking at the horizon. You're not seeing the opportunities and capitalizing on those. So
huge. Speaking of, I got to go look at some Jira systems. So let's wrap it. I'm just kidding. Some Jira tickets. Question for you. So you've written quite a few books, I believe, right? Can we talk a little bit about that? And what's the one book you're most excited about? And what's the lessons learned from it?
Yeah, like asking the favorite book is like asking about your favorite kids. But I have the first one I wrote was called Hacking Executive Leadership. And that's a bunch of tools and frameworks that people can use around decision making, hiring and recruiting, things like that. The latest book I have is An Insider's Perspective on the Chief of Staff, which is all about what that role is, how to be a good one, if you need one. And then the one I'm excited about because it's upcoming, I'm actually co-authoring a book with two former colleagues on private equity. So private equity people's like eyes kind of glaze over and they're not quite sure. So we want to make that accessible to people. So especially to founders and leadership teams who are in small to medium businesses who are either deciding if they want to partner with PE or not, or they have and they're like, okay, what happens now? What does this mean? And so we've all been involved in private equity from multiple vantage points. So either we had a private equity be our majority owner and sit on the board, or we were part of the private equity firm, a managing director there. So we've kind of seen this thing in multiple iterations from multiple vantage points. And we want to give people good information about what this experience is like in a very readable, accessible way.
Emily, that's a big deal because we need to talk more about this book, because if you think about most small and medium sized businesses, where are they going to exit? They're very small, tiny chance of an IPO, tiny. So then what's another way to go? VC is out of the question, right? VCs are interested in a 10 to 100x effect. They're shooting for 10-year returns that are massive. So most of us are going to exit to a private equity firm. So this is a really important topic. What was the book again? And what was like the lessons learned?
Yeah, so we're still on the final stages of the book, but it's called Onramp to Exit. So you can look for that or follow me on LinkedIn and I'll be sure to announce that. But you're right. So VC is early stage. So that's where people are kind of going for the moonshot, right? PE comes in later stage and take a PE firm who specializes in maybe an industry vertical and then maybe at a certain stage. They have these kind of set parameters they're looking for. It's their sweet spot. And so if you are in there and you say, okay, I have proven that I can grow at a certain rate. And what's holding me back is, let's say, funding in my tech stack, right? Like we could get more customers, we could be more exposed to brand awareness, all these things, if we were able to do this. And so that's where a PE firm might come in and say, okay, first of all, we specialize in your area. We know how to help you operationalize strategy here. We have connections in your industry. We can connect you with the right people, and we can give you a cash infusion to help you build that tech stack.
Huge.
That's where it's a win-win. So if you find the right pairing and match, it can be a win-win-win for everyone. So for the PE firm who does want their return at the end of their hold period, right? Like they're going to be driving to that return on investment. It can be a win for them. It can be a win for the original founders. Number one, because that's when you get a payday. But number two, that is one way to take your company to the next level. And it's a win for your customers because they're getting a more valuable product and service. So we want to talk about all of those things. Yeah.
And if not done right, it could be a disaster.
Totally.
I have some friends that had exits into private equity firms. They hold a little bit of resentment almost on how it all went. So that's a big deal just to learn that. Emily, will the book cover how to become attractive to a PE firm, how to get your EBITDA and your, optimize your business to sell at the highest level and potential second bite of the apple and all that? Do you get into that?
We do, yes. So if we're saying, here's what you need to do to professionalize your organization enough where a PE firm would take you seriously and actually consider you. Now, some PE firms say, look, I get it. You're doing like back of the napkin stuff. You're moving fast and we're going to help you professionalize that. But if you have that stuff already in place, that's very attractive to the PE firm. And if you have the right people in place and the right systems and tools and processes in place, that's also attractive because that mitigates their risk. They're saying, okay, they already have this stuff in place. They've already proven that they have these, security measures in place or these business operation pieces in place. Their sales operations move smoothly. If you can prove that you have all these things in place, then your value of the company goes up. So that's where that
Huge.
Negotiation for that opening
I like
number
it.
comes in. But yes,
Emily, let's talk a little bit about last couple questions, leadership in high pressure environments, because I find this to be extremely relevant right now with, I'm a positive leader and I like positive leaders. I like to be around them. I like to be them. But right now, many companies, whether they show it or not, are in high pressure situations, right? They can say all the nice things. They could be as positive or not, but handling these high pressure situations can make or break whether you retain your team, but also on the worst end, whether you can survive this next year or so. Like, what are your thoughts on how to balance being a positive leader in a high pressure situation while getting the message across to your team that work needs to get done and we need to move and we need to be quick and we need to be urgent and agile. And this is not the time to chill and mellow out and kind of go about your day in a 9-to-5 mindset,
The first thing I would say if you're in a high pressure situation is to breathe. Like literally like get oxygen into your brain. People forget to breathe and then they're like, why am I making a bad decision? It's because your brain isn't working properly. Yeah. So like literally breathing helps get oxygen to your muscles and to your brain. And then I would say in terms of the communication piece, which is key, I would get yourself sorted first and say, all right, I have this decision that I need to make. Objectively speaking, let me zoom out for a second. What's the best way to make this decision? So don't make a knee-jerk emotional kind of, I'm just kind of doing what I feel like in this moment. All right, let me take this holistically. What are some important factors I need to look at here? Where are some areas I need more information or more data? Where could I ask for someone else's opinion or input to help me make this decision? Take a moment, take a beat, take a pause, breathe, and say, how do I make this decision best? Then once you have made that decision or when you are in the process of making that decision, communicating that to your team is critically important because people aren't stupid. They know a decision's on the table and they're like, which way is he going to go? Which way is she going to go? And if you're communicating, hey, look, this is on the table. Here's how we're thinking about this. Here's what we're looking at. If you have some relevant information, I'd love to hear from you because you might have a different perspective, but here's what we're looking at. And to be very honest and transparent and candid with you, I would like the company to have these things. I would like us to have a different PTO policy. I would like us to have a different maternity paternity policy. In order to get those things, we need to accomplish X, Y, and Z. So I want us to accomplish X, Y, and Z, and then I want us to be able to reinvest in our people and reinvest in our company and community, et cetera. And just being that upfront with people. They understand that. They might not like you don't have the PTO policy now, but they understand. And they're like, okay, we have to hit X, Y, Z in order to get what we want. So I think taking time to make a good decision and setting yourself up well to do that. Don't just blaze through that. And then take the time to communicate to people. One, they'll appreciate it. Two, they'll be more productive and effective in their role. Because if someone is sitting there with uncertainty and with, oh my gosh, my job might go away, well, they're not operating at full capacity. They're sitting there at like 60% and all their energy is going to worrying. If you can help alleviate some of that, then you're helping out your team.
Emily, you used the word transparency. Huge. Sometimes you move in certain ways and you don't know if people even notice, if they even care, if they even appreciate. As my team became more and more senior and more mature, the biggest compliment they'll pay is like what I love about HireCloud, which is one of my companies, is the fact that it's so transparent. I mean, we put stuff up on the board. We'll tell people in a very calm fashion is like, hey, Q1 compared to last year we're down by 4%, 8% is not good. We got to get back on track. Here's some of the things that we need you to do. Here's some of the things we're doing. People have to understand that. So transparency is massive. And there was always a fear, right? If you put the fact that, hey, we're not doing as well, people could panic and freak out and leave. But I've seen the opposite, right? Yeah. The unknown is what scares people and worries them, and they make up stories and they come with when you're just honest, they're like, well, I guess if they're always honest, then they'll be honest if I should worry, right? Emily, last question. You've been amazing. Where can people find you, your podcast, your books, LinkedIn, all that?
Yeah, so my podcast is called Leveraging Leadership, and it's available wherever you get your podcast. So Leveraging Leadership. And then the best place to find me is my website, which is nextlevel.coach. So next level, all one word, .coach. And I'm also on LinkedIn. If you type in Emily Sander Coach, you'll find me there too. Would love to connect, and please let me know if you listen to this show and that's how you heard about it. And my podcast, Leveraging Leadership, website, nextlevel.coach, and LinkedIn.
And by the way, thank you so much, Emily. First of all, you were amazing. Another way we survive, I'm watching my team goof off, take silly pictures. It's like, in tough times, guys, smile, have fun, enjoy yourselves. I think that's the big one we miss out, right? We come to work 9 hours a day. We got to have some fun. So, Emily, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate you, and very much looking forward to the book, the PE book I'm most interested in. So. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, happy to have an episode on that. But thank you so much. You've had great questions and you've been very engaging.
You've been awesome. Thank you, Emily. And that brings us to the end of another great episode of the Tech Leaders Playbook. I want to thank you for joining us and hope you took away some valuable insights to apply in your professional journey. Don't forget to subscribe on your preferred podcast platform so you don't miss out on the next great conversation. I promise it'll be good. If you enjoyed today's episode, we'd appreciate if you could leave us a review. Your feedback not only helps us improve, but it also helps others discover the podcast. Better leaders mean better working environments. Better working environments leads to happier people. Remember, a rising tide lifts all boats. I'm Avita Santoplian, and this has been the Tech Leaders Playbook. Keep leading, keep learning, keep giving, and I'll see you on the next one. Until then, stay inspired, my friends.